Tonight's class will be an Aliyas Neshama for Yosef Elimelech ben Ruvain, as well as a Refuah Shlema L'chol HaCholim Sheba Klal Yisrael. All those that need a refuah. Before we continue with the story, it's going to take a little bit of time. A few people over the last few weeks asked me if we could have an open forum. I'm not sure that we should have just an entirely open forum, but I did a few weeks back, now already a few months back, if you remember. I started the class by opening it up for questions, and what's ironic is people didn't have questions. But over the last few weeks, a few individuals have come over and asked me if we could have a Q&A session. So I'm going to open the floor again. We won't take the whole evening for Q&A unless it becomes something that is quite engaging and everybody's interested in. But I'll try and help facilitate people's interests and answer questions. Specifically, I found one person's question quite ironic. I'm hoping that the person's not here. I don't remember who asked me. But the person asked if it would be okay that we had questions about life. So I didn't know how to take that because I thought that everything I taught is about life. All right.
Serious life. Serious life.
Yeah, I thought specifically I try, at the very minimum, I try and take anything that I teach in the Torah and show how it's relevant to our lives. Otherwise, why bother? Otherwise, why bother learning Torah? My teacher, my Rabbi, Rabbi Noach Meinberg Zatzal, he said that if Torah is not telling you how to live life, then you're not learning Torah. It's Torah Chaim. It's instructions for life. So we'll start.
So last lecture, in the last lecture, Rebecca told Yitzchak to steal the blessing, which I question you, why is it that she didn't have the power like Sarah did to tell the husband what to do? And then you said you had time to go over that. You forgot about it.
So, I don't know if anyone heard this question. The question was, why does Rebecca manipulate the system by having Jacob trick Isaac into receiving the blessing? Instead, why doesn't she just tell Yitzchak that the blessing should be given to Jacob, to Yaakov, and not to Esav? Why doesn't she have the power to sway Yitzchak like we see Sarah did with Abraham? What on the first initial response is that Sarah didn't sway Abraham. It was only that Hashem said to Abraham, listen to your wife. Sarah on her own was not able to convince Abraham. Sarah wanted Ishmael out of the house. She wanted him out. And Abraham was very distraught by that. He didn't want to throw Ishmael out. It's still his son. He had no intention probably of giving him the blessing that he was going to give Isaac, but he was not thrilled about the notion of throwing him out of the house. Abraham did not listen to Sarah simply because Sarah convinced him. On the contrary, it was only because Hashem told Abraham to listen to Sarah. What we learn from that, and what we're supposed to learn from that, and the rabbis in the Talmud do indeed tell us this, that when it comes to matters of the home, and it comes to understanding a person's nature, that women have a better sense than men. That women have a greater sensation of knowing where a person's at and whether or not this person's good for the home, bad for the home, this is a person you should get into a relationship with, this is a person maybe you shouldn't. That women have a better, more keener understanding of that than men. But suffice it to say that if it wasn't for Hashem's intervention, I don't know if Avram would have listened. I think Avram would have told Sarah, no, I'm not throwing him out. And perhaps that's the reason here that Rivka knows that she could try and sway Yitzchak, but he's not going to listen. He's not going to listen.
But Hashem still could have done what he did with Sarah. He could have done it with Rivka's case too. It could have been the same.
Could have, but she didn't know that.
Well, why not try?
Because, first of all, who says she didn't? We don't know whether she did or she didn't. I think I shared this with you last. I think I shared this perhaps with you or maybe with a side conversation. You know, you have to assume parents know who their children are. You know, I think, did I tell you the story about the playground? That the kid was being obnoxious, and and a friend of mine wanted to know, should I tell the parents? And I said, no. What are you going to gain by that? Because the parents know who their kid is. And we're going to see that Isaac knew who Esav was. Isaac understood. We saw that. I spoke about that last week. Why doesn't Isaac just give Esav the blessing? Instead, he makes him go and do a whole thing with the hunting. Because Isaac understands who Esav is, but he wants to channel who Esav is into doing a mitzvah. For all we know, Rebecca tried on numerous occasions, perhaps, to convince Isaac, and he stood his ground and said, no, you don't understand. I know that he's got these flaws, but if we just channel them the right way, then we can align him with what he's supposed to be doing. And for all we know, she just got frustrated. We have no reason to assume that she did or didn't try. And on the contrary, I would like to suggest that knowing how marriage works, that you have to assume she did try. And for whatever reason, I don't have the ability to explain, God did not intervene.
Maybe that's why she resorted to doing this, because she
That's what I'm saying. That's why she resorted. But to answer your question directly, though, we see that Sarah didn't have the ability to sway. Yep. Anyone else? No? Yeah.
Well, I asked you last week at the end, did Yitzchak figure out who he's giving the blessing to?
Yeah, that's what we're going to see tonight. Yeah, when I say we're opening it up for questions, my assumption is not on the storyline that we're doing, because that we'll get to. No, I'm just saying people had asked if they could have a chance to just ask questions that they have. But,
on anything?
Anything. Yeah, anything.
Open-ended.
Right. That's the point. That's the point. It's open-ended. People specifically asked me for it. People like, how often do you get the chance to ask a question to a rabbi?
I have a good one.
Yeah, please.
Kind of know the answer, but it's very difficult.
No, but I just like when people do that. It's almost a challenge.
It's difficult to understand, not to necessarily for you to explain it. How do you explain free will and fate at the same time in Judaism?
Not so difficult.
Difficult to understand.
Difficult to understand, not difficult to answer. Look, the whole story of fate and free will are intertwined in the story that we're doing with Jacob and Esav, and we spoke about that. I don't know if you were here. We spoke about that when we started the story about Jacob and Esav. Is Esav predetermined to be who he is, or does he have the ability to change? So free will and fate are very, very finely aligned with each other. And obviously, from a Jewish theological understanding, everything is in the hands of the Almighty. Nothing happens that the Almighty does not control. And nothing happens if God doesn't want it to happen.
Rob, I got a question on the...
One second.
Yeah.
I didn't even get to it yet. Just scratching the surface. That is the answer, right? But that it needs a little flushing out. You're right. That's it. Everything's in the hands of the Almighty. If you understand that, you understand free will, you understand fate, you understand all of life. Kol bidei shamayim, we say. Everything is in the hands of the Almighty. However, there is obviously free will, and they are delicately balanced. Nothing can happen in this world that the Almighty God does not deem it to happen. I cannot kill anyone if God does not deem that person deserving of death. Now that requires a tremendous amount of explanation. How every person that dies, you're saying, deserves death? Yes. Period. Do not extrapolate that, though, to mean that every person that dies did something that is punishable by death. That is not the same thing. That every person that dies is meant to have died, deserves, in the sense that this is what was meant to be, does not mean that because you did X, you have to die. Those are two very, very different statements. That we do not have the full picture of life. We cannot fathom every incident and every nuance of life and grasp all the intricacies as to why this is happening. No person, no one, has the ability to say, this is why this happened. We have no prophets anymore. That's gone. Prophecy is gone. Only a prophet could say, this is why this happened. The only thing we can say definitively is that we do not have the full spectrum of any given life to know why any particular thing is happening. That means that we do not know what happened before that child came into the world, that baby came into the world, and we do not know what happens and what transpires after that human life leaves the world. Whether baby, toddler, teenager, adult, old person. We have no idea what happens prior to life in this world, and we have no idea what transpires after life. And therefore, we cannot ever say how any given act fits within the puzzle of that individual's life. What we have to say, though, is that there's an infinite being that controls the universe. And therefore, everything that does happen must happen for a reason. And that's why I say, if a person dies, it must be for a reason. That's what deserves means. Therefore, my decision to kill someone is almost irrelevant, isn't it? My decision to kill someone is only relevant vis-a-vis me, the choice that I make. If I choose to pull the trigger, but that person is not meant to die, my gun will jam. I'll miss. The gun will backfire and perhaps I'll kill myself. Who knows what will happen? I'll go to shoot the gun, the person will trip and fall right at that moment, and the gun, and nothing will happen to the person. Free will, therefore, is limited to one thing and one thing only. And that is, the Hebrew word for free will is bechira, choice. The only thing that I have the ability to do is choose. The result of that action is not up to me. The choice is up to me. That is where free will lies. And that is true about all aspects of life. I'm giving you the example of me trying to kill another human being. But that is true in regards to my own personal growth as well. I can choose to grow. I can choose not to grow. I can choose to develop myself. I can choose not to. That's it. I can only choose. The result of that choice, that's in the hands of God. And that is where free will and fate overlap and intertwine with each other.
Yeah. To follow up on that, I understand what you're saying as far as the result of the consequence of your choice, of your Bechira point, but my point is that choice that you even make is predetermined, is determined by God. God knows whether you're turning left or right.
Knowing what I choose and my ability to choose are not one and the same. Now, The reason we have difficulty understanding this is because we are subject and limited to the physical world that we live in. And one of the limitations of the physical world is time. We are bound by time. Forget what H.G. Wells spoke about, forget what Einstein spoke about. We are bound by time. And therefore, it is beyond our comprehension to have the ability to understand how a being that is outside the realm of time can also allow time to exist. That is beyond our comprehension. The best analogy that one can give, I have not heard a better analogy, but the best analogy that one can give is, imagine if H.G. Wells was right, and you had the ability to travel in time. And you would go back in time. And you would go back to the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. And you're in the theater. And you are in the theater and you are about to watch. Oh, my mind just went blank. What's his name?
John
Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth. And you're about to watch John Wilkes Booth. I always go to Lincoln because we know that one. Kennedy, there's too much controversy. Right? You go back to Lincoln and you're about to watch Booth pull the trigger. Do you know exactly what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You know exactly what's going to happen from history. You're in the future. You've gone back in the past. You've had the ability to travel in time. You are now sitting there watching John Wilkes Booth about to pull the trigger to Abraham Lincoln. And you know very well he's going to be shot and killed. Does that have any bearing on John Wilkes Booth's decision? No. The fact that you know it has no bearing on his decision at that moment. He's deciding to do it at that moment. Could he change his mind? Yes. Will he change his mind? No. Now, that is very difficult for us to understand.
You can get him to change his mind, no?
That's only if you want to step in. But without getting into, Doc, and Back to the Future will tell you, don't do that. It'll mess the whole, time continuum thing mess up. You'll be looking at the picture and you'll disappear if you step in. So who knows what will happen if you step in? You might disappear. Because who knows what Lincoln's assassination had anything to do with your creation. You might disappear, you step in. So don't do that. But at that moment, you have no bearing on his decision. He's making that choice right at that moment. His choice, you know. That is God. God is outside of the limitations of time and therefore can jump in and out and exists at every moment in time because God doesn't exist within time. Time is a creation of God's. That's why this is beyond our comprehension. I've given this example to you guys before, but I'll do it again. I challenge anyone. I've had a standing challenge, and we're not going to do it now because it'll waste the whole evening, but if anyone wants to, in private, you come up to me, I'll give you a $100 bill. If you can describe to me a spiritual experience, but here's the qualifications. You may not use any term whatsoever that has any relevance to the physical existence. And you can't do it. It's impossible. You cannot describe a spiritual experience without using any physical experience terminology.
Can you describe any experience without using the physical?
No. That's the point. Why? Because you are stuck within the perspective of the physical world. The best you could do is to give analogous understandings. And that's why the rabbis, when they speak about hell, when they speak about heaven, what do they speak about? Fire and brimstone. And we look at with the Christians and we say, oh, that's absurd. You guys got it wrong. There's no place, hell, of fire and brimstone. But where do you think they got it from? They stole it from us. Fire and brimstone. Why? Because how are you going to understand a spiritual existence called hell without having a physical analogy. Unless you're told something really bad. Because hell is bad. Well, what is it? Well, it's spiritual pain. Well, what's spiritual pain, Rabbi? It's where your soul feels pain for everything it did. Rabbi, I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, fire and brimstone. Oh, I got you. You're going to burn in the fires of hell. Oh, now I understand. I do not want to be in fires of hell. Okay? So therefore, just like that is an example of how we cannot comprehend anything outside the realm of our existence, we cannot comprehend anything that is outside the concept of time, because we are subject and limited to time. God, on the other hand, is outside of time. So because God knows what we choose is not in any way a contradiction to free will. Huh? Yeah.
So, doesn't that make us like pretty much question the whole Torah?
God forbid. Why?
No, because how do
Please
we know
explain
at
yourself.
what point is it literal? At what point is just saying it because there's no other way for us to understand?
Very good. So, first and foremost, everything I'm going to tell you is only known because of the oral Torah, the oral tradition. We have what's known as the following. We have a written Torah and we have an oral Torah. What are we doing here?
Oh, sorry.
You'll edit all this out, right? You'll edit all this out.
All the time.
All the time. For the 3 viewers. What are we up to? 12. We're for the 12 viewers. My son's got one of my daughters and my son. They said, all right, we figured it out. We're going to make $1 million. We're going to do YouTube. We're going to become rich, becoming a YouTube presenter. And I said, and how do you plan on becoming rich? Well, you just need a certain number of viewers. If you get a certain number of viewers, YouTube actually pays you. And they said, so we're just going to sit there and keep clicking, watch. It doesn't work that way. They know that you're doing that. Well, how do they know that? I had to explain the whole concept. So we got 12 viewers, or is it 12 viewed by one person?
Views.
Okay.
Let's give aliyah for the YouTube subscribers.
The YouTube subscribers, okay. So,
Can I
you're in the middle of your question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The reason I actually asked that is because the ex-chief rabbi of Britain, I think it was.
The ex-chief, the former.
Okay,
Not
sorry.
ex.
I forget his
Ex
name.
connotates a certain something.
There's an interview with him, and he's pretty much saying he's like everything in the Torah, all the stories are parables, and they never really happened.
Yeah, I totally disagree with that, and I don't.
Yeah, a lot of rabbis do.
And I would like to hear him say that. I don't believe he
I
said
forget
that.
his name. He's,
Yeah, I know exactly. Lord Jonathan Sachs.
yeah, there we go.
I would have to see. Huh?
I don't think he would say that.
I don't
No,
think
I
he
saw
said
the
that.
video.
You saw the video.
I just played it for you. I saw the video.
Send me the link.
Some are
'cause-
parables.
Send me the link. No.
Moses and desert. And
No, I cannot believe he
Adam and
said
Eve
that.
were parables.
I cannot believe he said that, and I'm perhaps I'm just look. I'm on video here. I cannot believe he said that, and on the contrary, I'm willing to suggest that maybe you misunderstood. Just because we have that's what I started to answer. Judaism is built on the following. Judaism is built on an understanding that we are taught from God what life is about. For those of you who know, I hope you all know, I wrote a book called 7 Traits. I hope you all have it. If you don't,
Get it.
Bring mix.
you don't, then I'll assume you're just coming for the food. So, and there's no food this week. So those of you who are here are not here for the food, so you must like what I have to say. Either that or Gabe twisted your arm, so you should have my book. So I want to write a second book. And the second book, I just haven't just gotten the, just get the train moving yet. Until the train starts moving, it probably never happened. But the second book I want to write is called God Isn't. a great title, I think. A rabbi writes a book, God Isn't. And the book is going to be, God isn't X, Y, and Z. Rather, God is A, B, C. God isn't all the misunderstandings and misconceptions that people have about God. People have a tremendous misunderstanding about what God is and what God isn't. And in the introduction to this book that hopefully will be written one day is going to be a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is that it would be incredibly arrogant and presumptuous for me to write such a book. To claim that I know what God is. Forget what God isn't. That's easy. That's logic. I can tell you what God isn't based on logic. But to tell you what God is incredibly arrogant and presumptuous. Because that would be like me telling any of you who you are to the deep core of who you are. Not just what I can understand from psychology and what I can understand from what you've shared with me. No. Just because of the audacity of me to say, no, this is who you are, and if you don't agree, then you're wrong. Like, incredibly presumptuous. The only reason that I can say what God is or isn't is because we have a teaching that we were given by God to say what God is and what God isn't. Does everyone follow? Judaism is built on the very premise that we understand what life is about only because God told us what life is about. And that's called Torah. Torah tells us what life is about. Torah tells us everything. And you cannot understand Torah without realizing and understanding and knowing that there are two Torahs. There's a Torah that we relate to in the manifestation of a written book called the 5 Books of Moses. That's the Torah. That is known as the written Torah. But along with that written Torah is what is known as the oral Torah. A compendium of explanations that were given to Moses at Mount Sinai and then subsequently to Joshua, to the elders, and so on and so forth, handed down in every generation. An explanation of what Torah is about. And that is not something unique to Judaism. That is something that every culture and civilization must have. There's a story in the Talmud, famous story. You know, I told you the definition of famous. If I know it, therefore it's famous. It's a famous story in the Talmud where a non-Jew came to Shammai and said, I accept the written Torah, but I don't accept the oral Torah. Please convert me and teach me the written Torah. And Shammai beat him and threw him out and said, get out. You cannot become a Jew if you don't accept the oral Torah. And so he went to Hillel. And he said to Hillel, he said, I want to become a Jew, but I only accept the written Torah. And Hillel said, okay, you want to understand the written Torah? So first you have to learn Aleph base. So memorize this. And he showed him an Aleph, a base, a Gimel, Dalet, Hey. And he says, Aleph base, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Showed him the Aleph base, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Okay? He says, go back, come back tomorrow, go home, come back tomorrow, and we'll take it from here. He comes back the next day, and Hillel says, let's go over what we did yesterday. And the non-Jew says, okay, great, I got it. He went Aleph, base, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, and Hillel said, no. Base, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Aleph. And the non-Jew said, but that's not what you said yesterday. And Hillel said, if you're going to rely on what I said yesterday, then you have to rely on what I say today. In other words, what Hillel was proving to him is you cannot know Torah without an oral Torah. You cannot read that can of soda unless someone told you that that's a C and it has the K sound. If no one ever told you that, you'd never be able to read. If no one ever told you that the O is C-O is co, you'd never be able to read. You cannot read a written document without an oral Torah, without an oral explanation of how to read that document. Period. And therefore, Torah is not unique in that it has an oral Torah along with it. What makes Torah unique is that we are told that our oral Torah comes right from the Almighty. And in the oral Torah, we are told the following. That there are 13 fundamental principles of what a person has to agree with and accept if they want to say that they are aligned with Torah Judaism. You want to say you're aligned with something else? By all means, you can say whatever you want. But don't say it's Judaism. In order to be aligned with Torah Judaism, you have to understand the following. That anything that is written in the 5 books of Moses is true, period. Period. If it's written in the 5 books of Moses, it's true, period.
Wow. True, like physically.
True, period.
Spiritually,
True.
The Gemara does say that some things are parables.
The only thing that the Gemara says is parables are things that are absurd, like saying that God has a hand. That's it. The Rambam, who listed these 13 principles, he comes along and he wrote a book called the Mara Nevuchim. The Mara Nevuchim was specifically to answer this question. So the whole book was written about. To understand how do we delicately balance those things which are clearly literal, those things which are clearly not literal, and the sea that exists in between. And he says the following. Anything that is written in the Torah is true, unless it is speaking about God in an anthropomorphic manner. If it's speaking about God in an anthropomorphic manner, then that cannot be true. God does not have hands, God does not have eyes, God does not have fingers. Other than that, it is true. Once you enter the realm of oral Torah being the parables, the stories, the explanations that the rabbis give to describe the Torah, then he says the following. He says, anyone who says all of this is true is a fool. Anyone who says that none of it is true is a heretic. Well, then you're left with your question again. Well, how do you know? And what the Rambam is trying to convey very, very simply is it's irrelevant whether it's true or not.
The oral part.
The oral part. It's irrelevant. What matters is what is the lesson that's trying to be conveyed. And the lesson that's trying to be conveyed is all that matters. Whether it happened, whether it didn't happen, outside the 5 books of Moses, that's not relevant. What is relevant is what is the lesson that the Torah is trying to convey. In regards to the 5 books of Moses, I would argue on any rabbi that says that it didn't happen. I would say, I don't understand how you can say that and call yourself a Torah-minded Jew.
So why speak in code, not just speak?
Yeah.
Like,
So I don't know if anyone here is a programmer, but I asked this question to a gentleman in my community who is a very, very talented programmer. He's worked for some of the top tech companies. I can't say any names just because who knows who's going to see this, but suffice it to say, they are names that you are extremely familiar with. And he coded for them. And I asked him the following question. I said, do you ever have a situation where you have a code that's written and that code is readable on its own, but within that code, the code is readable on its own, but within that code are multiple layers of code that each time it's opened is readable on its own and then opens a new layer? And he said, absolutely, it happens Many times in code they have situations like that. He even told me the technical term, which I forgot, where the surface code is readable, and then within that are layers upon layers upon layers that are only opened when necessary. And they might never be opened by the programming. They are put in there and they might never be opened. Bless you. It's like there's this car that I think Dodge sells. And every car, this is, I think it's the Charger, the Dodge Charger. Every car has this hidden code built into it. That if you buy one colored key, you get the regular car. But if you buy a different colored key, it opens up a whole new level of the engine. And it's like you got to pay an extra 25 grand for it. But it's in there anyway. Okay? But it's in there anyway. But you got to pay to get the key. So too here. There's programs that programmers, coders write that might never be opened, but they're in there. And if they're ever needed, it's opened and a whole new layer opens up. Now, I said, why would you do that then? He said, to save space. He says, if we spelled out in code all of those layers, the amount of memory and data it would take up would be immense. This way, it's all encapsulated. There are 304,000 letters in the Torah. Could you imagine if everything that the Torah was trying to tell us was written out?
Well, we have it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Could you imagine if that was in a Torah scroll?
What's your source?
In one Torah scroll. Yeah.
Is there a source where you got that from?
Right, but also a lot of it is also debates about what the Torah said. If the Torah just said it out front,
Take out all the debates.
that's half of it.
No, it's not.
Come on.
You take out all the debates. You got in the back of every Gemara, you've got the Ran. The Ran, and we're getting way out of the scope of this class. If you take out all the arguments in the oral Torah, you're still going to have an immense volume of work, and that is not even dealing with. That's just dealing with Talmud you're talking about, where it's legal discussions. What about all the homiletical discussions that are not arguments, but just that what the Torah is trying to teach us? Rashi, what the Torah is trying to teach us. Could you imagine if that was written out? So that's the answer to your question. The only way to, this is the genius of the Torah. No human could write this. There's a list of proofs of Torah. One of the proofs is called the genius proof. There's one's called the historical proof, one's called the genius proof, one's called the analytical. There's a whole different series of proofs of whether or not God wrote the Torah. One of the proofs is categorized by a teacher that taught me them as the genius proof. The genius of the writing of this document is mind-boggling. The amount of depth that is encapsulated in what is readable on the surface and then goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Show me another document where a 5-year-old can get something out of it and a 95-year-old can get something out of it.
It's still relatable today.
It's also the numbers that you're not even getting into.
Yeah, you can't even.
Yeah,
I'm just like only a genius could write something that can read on the surface, is readable, and yet has so much depth, so much insight. That's why. There'd be no other. It would be volumes upon volumes upon volumes upon volumes upon volumes if it was spelled out. That's why it's encoded. All right. Should we do a little bit of the story now?
Okay. Just a quick question.
Yeah,
really
right, sure. Why not?
Really
No such thing, but all right. I mean, I can answer all these questions really fast. Like the first question, God wrote everything. Well, there you go. Hakol b'dei Shemayim.
Hashem being able to be two places in time at once because he's not bound to the parameters.
No. Hashem is not in two places at time at once.
I'm just saying he could.
He's everywhere at once.
No. He's in all places in time because there is no time.
Fine. Okay. So my question is: is time really linear or it's not linear according to the Torah?
No, time is not linear at all. time, the best analogy I could give you for time, and it's unbelievable. You know, another proof of Torah. Another proof of Torah is what I like to call the card house proof. What I call the card house proof is that if anyone ever playing cards, you ever build a house cards? So eventually, unless you're doing something with glue and something, and unless you're doing something with toothpicks and whatnot, eventually what will happen? It will crumble. Why? The sheer weight. It will collapse on its own weight. It eventually cannot stand up to its own weight. Okay? That is how Torah is also understandably absolutely true, is because you pointed out arguments. Even though there are arguments, and that's a whole discussion, those arguments are not a contradiction at all if you really understand what it is they're arguing over. But, and someone mentioned gematria. If you start putting together all the different things about Torah and how this connects to this, 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 and you start piling on the connections, if it was all convoluted, if it was all just arbitrary connections that you are making up, eventually what would happen? It would eventually just collapse and cave on itself. And yet you don't find that. You don't find that with Torah. You don't find that whenever they say, and this connects to this, connects to this, connects to this, it just keeps going. It literally keeps going. You can continuously start a whole chain of connections in Torah. You could start out with one word. Just start out with one word, and before you know it, you can connect that to 30 different aspects of Judaism and Torah. Starting with gematria, and then from gematria to meaning. Define the word, and if you define the word, you see that, oh, that connects to that over here. And it just builds and builds and builds. That is true here. It is no accident that what is the building block of creation of the human being? What is the building block of the creation of the human being?
DNA.
DNA. DNA. The human being is body and soul. So going with the body, DNA. It is no accident that DNA is in the shape of a spiral. That is the closest understanding of time as well. Time is a spiral. It is not linear. It is a spiral. Why? Because it is fascinating that if you take any point on that spiral, you take it, every point on that spiral is a circle. Okay? If you know, like a spiral, if you smash it down, it's a singular circle. If you smash a spiral down, it becomes a singular circle. That circle will be 1 year. When God created the world, God created time. Well, what time did God create? There's many aspects of time. There's a day. There's a second. There's an hour. There's a month. There's a year. What was created? So we are told that what was created at the moment of creation in time was a year. God created a year. And everything that is within the year was created. All the different aspects of a year. You got the seasons, you've got daylight, sunlight, all within the year. And then that year was taken and turned into a spiral. And it just keeps repeating itself. Because what's the Hebrew word for year? Shana, which also means to repeat. The year just repeats itself over and over and over and over again. And so therefore, if you take any point on that year, on that circle, okay, 15th of Nisan, boom. What happened on the 15th of Nisan? The Jewish people left Egypt. So now, you've got 5,000 circles now. And you put Huh?
6, no?
Oh, well, oh yeah. You got 5,779 circles. 5,779 circles so far. Okay? And you put a point on that circle, and you point at the 15th day of Nisan. And now you draw a perpendicular line going down. That will be every 15th day of Nisan from the start of creation until now. They will be united. So time is not linear. Time is linear in that it's a circle, and that singular circle is two-dimensional. But you've got all the circles piled on top of each other, connecting to each other as well, and you've got perpendicular lines running through each singular day. And that's why we say that there's a certain energy that exists on every day that doesn't exist on any other day, because it's the same day repeating itself over and over and over again.
And those energies were created within the first year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that can't be changed though?
When did you create the first? On what day did you create the first year? Is it the first day you created a year?
When he created time. Time
Time was created on what, day one?
Day time. No, that's day. That's day. The concept.
Oh, okay.
Concept. That's the physical creation of day and night. But the concept of time was right at the very beginning.
So
The instant of creation. The instant of creation of the physical world, that's the creation of time.
So he can be in the past as well right now, or are we present time?
Well, okay, now we're getting way off. Therefore, in theory, again, this is all in theory, it's all theoretical, but in theory, I mentioned H.G. Wells, and in theory, the concept of time travel should not be that absurd, because those circles are constantly repeating itself, and therefore they actually are all existing at the same time as well. But that's a very, very different discussion entirely.
That's right.
Okay. We are on 137. The last we've been discussing was Jacob has tricked Isaac by dressing up Isaac. Just to recap for anyone who's not remembering, or one or two new faces. So Isaac has decided he wants to give the blessing. He wants to hand the baton off to the next generation. Abraham handed it to Isaac. Isaac now wants to hand it to the next generation. The next generation is Esav and Jacob. Isaac has decided he wants to give it to Esav. Isaac's wife has decided that would be a mistake, and she wants it to go to Jacob. So she contrives this plot that while Esav is out hunting, Jacob goes in with food that she prepared, wearing Esav's clothing and wearing the hides of the animals that she cooked, so that he feels hairy, and therefore he will not be recognized. And we finished off with Isaac confused. Isaac was confused. And remember, we spoke about the confusion because Jacob said God's name. And as soon as Isaac heard that, he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Come here, let me feel you. And he felt him, and he said the classic line, Hakol kol Yaakov v'hayadayim de'esav. That it's the voice of Yaakov, but it's the hands of Esav. And that's where we got up to. And he says, all right, you seem to be Esav. You seem to be Esav. Let me eat and bless you. And then he served him, and he ate, and he drank. And the last line on 137, and then his father Isaac said to him, come close if you please, and kiss me, my son. So he drew close and kissed him. He smelled the fragrance of his garments and blessed him. And said, see, the fragrance of my son is like the fragrance of a field which Hashem had blessed. Isaac is confused again. He says, come smell me. Come here, let me kiss you. And he smells him, and he smells, and he says, this is the fragrance of a field that Hashem blessed. He smelled the Garden of Eden. He smelled the Garden of Eden. And he said, something's wrong. He's still unsure. And may God, and then he gave him the blessing. May God give you of the dew of the heavens and of the fatness of the earth, and abundant grain and wine. People will serve you, Regimes will prostrate themselves to you. Be a lord to your kinsmen, and your mother's sons will prostrate themselves to you. Cursed be they who curse you. Blessed be they who bless you. He gave him a blessing. You notice it's only partial of the blessing that Abraham gave to Isaac. There's something missing. We'll speak about it in a moment. But the only thing that's similar to the blessing that Abraham received is that you will be the source of blessing in the world. Anyone who blesses you, they will be blessed. And anyone who doesn't bless you will not be blessed. That was what Abraham was told. And it was when Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, Jacob had scarcely left from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came back from the hunt. Suspense. He too made delicacies and brought them to his father. He said to his father, "Let my father rise and eat of his son's game, so that your soul will bless me." I don't know if you notice it in English. It's like, you don't really see it. You don't really see it, but in English, it's not as the contrast is not as stark. But in the Hebrew, it comes across much greater. Whereas when Jacob came in, he says, "I'm here." And then Isaac asks, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm Esau, I'm your firstborn. I did what you told me. Please sit, eat, and then so you can bless me." If you look in the Hebrew, it's a very cordial request. Here with Esau comes in, he says, and he's pretty much, the English doesn't do it justice, but in the Hebrew it's like, "All right, get up, eat, and give me my blessing." It's like very gruff. You can see there's the nuance. So Isaac, his father, said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I am your firstborn son, Esau." And Isaac trembled in a very great perplexity. Isaac was scared. And he said, "Who, where is the one who hunted game, brought it to me? I partook of all when you had not yet come, and I blessed him. Indeed, he shall be blessed." And right there, we actually see Isaac understood exactly what had transpired. Isaac trembles tremendously when Esau comes in and says, "Here's the food, give me my blessing." And Isaac goes, What's going on here? Someone already came in and gave me food while you were out hunting. Who's that? Now, one thing I've taught you guys on numerous times, I say it every time I teach people, make the story real. If you don't make the story real, it's nonsense. Isaac is a real person. What is going through Isaac's head right now? Clearly, this is Esau. I have no doubt. Now, he doesn't say, "Who are you?" He knows this is Esau. He knows exactly who this is. And he says, "Somebody came in and stole the blessing." Who does he think that was? What does he think? He got held up? What does he think? That some hoodlum held him up at gunpoint and said, "Hey, give me the blessing"? Who does he think was just there then? He's only thinking one person.
Jacob.
He knows right away, my God, Jacob came in and stole the blessing. He's not thinking, "Oh, that brat down the street. That brat down the street snuck in here and stole the blessing." He knows right away it must have been Jacob. And now, he's an incredibly sharp individual. He's now thinking. And I'm sure every single one of you have been in a situation where something was not what you thought it was, and all of a sudden the wheels start turning. And the wheels start turning, and you start thinking, "Wait, what's going on?" And all of a sudden it becomes very clear what's going on. And that's exactly what happened to to Isaac.
Right.
Why in the world would Jacob, the man who his whole life was about truth, his whole life was about doing the right thing, Why in the world would he come and steal the blessing? Unless he knew something I didn't. Unless he saw that giving Esav a blessing was a mistake. And if he saw that, then maybe I was actually wrong. Esav does not deserve the blessing. Isaac realizes it right away. Because let me ask you a question, gentlemen. Okay? I pick up this date here. In Judaism, we have a law. You can't eat or drink without saying a blessing. Okay? Now I think that I'm about to eat a date, and I say the wrong blessing on that date. Does that work? Does the blessing work? No. In order to eat this date, you have to say a blessing of Borei Pri Ha'etz. And I pick it up and I say, Borei Pri HaGefen. Doesn't work. I said the wrong blessing. Now let's flip it. I pick up a phone, and I want to use a phone, but I think it's a date, because I'm an idiot. And I say a blessing. What did I just say? No, I said a blessing. I said a blessing for nothing. In Judaism, that's called a bracha levatala. It's called a void blessing.
Is it the first one? Bracha levatala?
Also. I wanted to get into the flow. Now I pick up a date, and I think that a date's not going to work. I pick up a tomato. There you go, a tomato, and I think it's a peach. And a blessing on a tomato is Borei Pri Ha'adama. The blessing on a peach is Borei Pri Ha'etz. And I'm holding a tomato, but I think it's a peach. And I say Borei Pri Ha'etz. Does that work?
Yes.
No. You just said a blessing mistakenly.
The opposite would
The opposite, that's why I wanted to make to show the example. The opposite would work. And the dumb on an eitz works. But here, you're supposed to say on a dumb, you say an eitz, doesn't work. If Isaac thinks that he's giving a blessing to Esav, but it turns out it's not Esav, does that blessing work?
Shouldn't.
It shouldn't. It doesn't.
But at the end he said,
It doesn't. Oh, you caught it. Look at what he says. Look at what he says. Where? Who is the one who hunted game, brought it to me, I took of it when you had not yet come, I blessed him. He shall be blessed. Isaac says, he shall be blessed. He realizes Jacob needs to get the blessing. Right there. He says, he will be blessed. Why? He messed up. Nope. He realizes he's going to get the blessing. And we will see that he actually goes, summons Jacob in, and gives Jacob the full blessing.
Why did he realize that Jacob was the correct person to recipient of the blessing at that point?
How else could this have happened?
Is that because you're saying he's
How
such a
else
loyal person?
would God have allowed this to transpire?
It must be that he was.
It must be. There's a story in the Talmud. There's a story in the Talmud about a donkey. About a donkey that was owned by a very righteous individual. And they went to the inn. They were staying at the inn, and the innkeeper tried to serve the donkey produce that had not had tithe taken from it. Donkey's allowed to eat produce that doesn't have tithe taken from it, but the donkey refused to eat. The donkey refused to eat. And the rabbis saw from that story, because the rabbi himself, the owner, said, why isn't my donkey eating? Something's up. Did you take tithing on all this produce? No, I didn't yet. Ah, now I know why my donkey's not eating. That you could have ended up serving that to me by mistake. And I would have ended up eating produce that had not had tithing taken from it. And the rabbis in the Talmud say, look at this story. You see that God protects even the donkey of a righteous person. How much more so does God protect the righteous person? Isaac understands there is no way the Almighty would have allowed me to have been tricked like this unless I was already being tricked. I was already being tricked. Esav has been tricking me all along. Esav has got me duped into thinking that he can fix himself, that he can realign himself. No. Yeah.
Did Isaac know that his two sons would grow to be two different nations?
Yeah. Oh.
Beforehand?
No. What's interesting is, we didn't go into this, but remember his wife had a prophecy. His wife had a prophecy. It's clear that she never told that prophecy.
So so if he doesn't know that they're going to separate into two separate nations, what's the big deal about that blessing? Why can't he give that blessing to both of them?
No, there can only be one leader. The blessing is the leadership. The blessing is the leadership. The blessing is the one that's going to take the mantle, take that mantle, take the baton and run with building the Jewish people. You cannot have both.
So it was like a leader.
Even when you share, one has to be in a leadership position in terms of the one who's responsible for forming the direction, for forming the mission of the Jewish people. The other one, that was going to be Jacob, but Isaac said no. Isaac said no, it should be Esav.
Because he was firstborn?
Yeah.
So why Rebecca just say the prophecy later on in their life, like, hey.
So, my teacher, his answer, and it's the only answer I have, I've never heard a different answer, and I don't know, I can't say I've heard a better answer, because I've never heard a different answer. But he says that it's clear from this story that we see that a prophecy is only to be shared if you are told to share the prophecy. If you see in all the prophets they write that God said to say this. God said, God came to me and told me to say. So he said that you see from this story that rule. That she was told a prophecy, but she was never told to share it. And therefore, she thought she wasn't allowed.
And she was told the prophecy so she would know that Jacob should be the one to get the blessing, and that's why she could come.
Well, she was told the prophecy, we saw, because she was distraught. She was very distraught over her pregnancy. She was in anguish. She thought something was wrong. Something was wrong with her. Something was wrong with the pregnancy. And rabbis even actually tell us as a result of that a woman's mindset during pregnancy is actually very formative in terms of the babies. And you see, she got a prophecy. Who says she was supposed to get that prophecy? She got that prophecy because she was so distraught. Perhaps, I'm suggesting that the only reason she got the prophecy was so that she could be calmed because she's pregnant, and that angst and that anxiousness is detrimental to the babies. Yeah. All right. One last question.
While we're on the topic of this, does the Torah say anything about twins? Since this story has something to do with twins, like, is there something special about twins, or it just happens to be?
I mean, they're not the only twins,
right?
But no, I don't know anything. The Torah itself does not have anything directly to say about twins, but there's definitely stuff written about twins. Yeah.
Based on the last part, when it said Isaac said like he's gonna remain blessed, I was thinking that meant that he knew it was Yaakov when he was initially blessing him. Because of what you said.
Then why was he scared?
Because he's dealing with Esau now.
No.
And he has to inform Esau.
No, because he says, who was that? Who was that? No, he didn't know it was him. Remember, it can't be. Look at the words. The words are, you're clearly Esau.
But I thought that's maybe to him he's saying that. So
why would he tell Jacob, you're Esau?
Oh, to Jacob he's saying that. Okay.
Yeah. Jacob comes in all disguised.
But he says you have the voice of Jacob.
Yeah, that's why he's confused. You have the voice of Jacob, but yet you're Esau. How that one? And he's very confused. And then he says, okay, you're Esau, all right.
does Isaac get criticized for being duped like this twice in a row? You know?
No, also with all his work at college, how come he couldn't figure it out? That's what bothers me. Like you're saying, he was duped his entire life that Esau was the righteous one, or the one that was supposed to get the blessing moving forward. How does he not know that his entire life, that it's not supposed to be him?
Well,
You know, like...
because prophecy doesn't mean you know everything. Ruach HaKodesh doesn't mean you know everything.
No, but just off his own intellect, the knowledge.
Oh, you
his
won't?
children.
But we spoke about that, so you have to go watch the video or listen to the audio. Why did he want Esau? He knew who Esau was. Why did he want Esau? We spoke about that. We spoke about that he knew who Esau was. That's why he sent them out to do the hunting, because he knew who Esau was. Why did he just give him the blessing? So you have to go watch. I can't go over it again. But
if he blessed Jacob when he thought it's Esau.
the blessing doesn't work.
Right, but he said he'll remain blessed.
Right, he will be blessed. No, he will be blessed.
It said he'll remain blessed.
He will. Yeah, they don't English.
Esau got a blessing too,
He's
right?
going to give him a blessing.
Yeah, he gives Esau.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see the blessing he gives him. It's a problematic blessing.
So does that work for food as well?
What do you mean? Does that work for food
You
as well?
take a peach, you say "Puyadema," and then you say, "Oh, this blessing shall work."
No.
What's the emotion that's going on in Isaac right now? As a father, as just a rabbi, what's the
What do you mean?
emotion that's happening? Is he sad? Is he disappointed?
Finally, he knows the
Look.
truth.
Is he like, hey, this is all in the writings? You know, what's going on here?
Well,
emotionally.
Emotionally, I can't answer what he's feeling emotionally. The only thing I can tell you is he's a tzaddik. He is a righteous person, and a righteous person has the ability to control and direct his emotions.